Good afternoon and welcome to Training Tuesday. Hang on, I haven't got the wrong studio. Welcome to the new Training Tuesday studio here in Southampton. Yes, it does look like a cookery programme, but never mind, we'll carry on. Welcome along to the new Training Tuesday studio launching today. What are we going to be looking at today? Well, we're going to be talking about TouchScene and integrating TouchScene with MagicQ. For those that haven't come across TouchScene before, we have a 4-inch, which is our TouchScene Mini, and the 8-inch, which is TouchScene. And these are wall controllers, so designed to be mounted on the wall, as demoed on my little rack board here. And they'll fit in either your UK, European, or US back boxes, and they will talk to either a MagicQ console or PC system. They'll talk to a QuickQ control system, so a QuickQ console, or rack or DIN. They won't talk to QuickQ on PC because QuickQ on PC is for designer software only. It has no output or inputs. And they will also talk to a genetics node. So I'm on the back here, GN2 or GN5. You can store static lighting scenes on the GN2s and 5s, and you can trigger them from the TouchScene as well. Today we're going to be focused specifically on interfacing TouchScene with a MagicQ control system. In the future Training Tuesdays, we'll look at interfacing with either QuickQ or genetics. As always, it's a completely live session, so do feel free to ask questions as we go along through the session today. Hello to the usual faces out there. Hello Stevie, and also we've got hello Mehmet, and hello any others that are joining us as well. And if you are watching this later on, please do feel free, still drop your questions in the chat. We do monitor the chat over the weeks ahead, both on Facebook and YouTube, and we will answer your comments on there as well. So without further ado then, so I mentioned TouchScene, we're going to be talking to a MagicQ control system, just talking about what I've got here. I've got two TouchScenes, the 4 and the 8-inch. They're going into a PoE switch, so TouchScenes are done. They have no programming on them themselves. No programming on them. They will trigger cues or things, executes or playbacks on a MagicQ system. I've got set up here. As I said, you can have them talk to a QuickQ or genetics as well, but here I'm talking to MagicQ. So they're done. There's no programming on them. They're just an interface to do triggering. And right now they're network powered, so they're PoE powered. You can see the two red cables I've got coming out the bottom of my rack here. They're connected to a GS8, which is our PoE network switch, and then the black cable I've got here is going round to my laptop on the table here, which is running MagicQ on PC. The setup with a console or a MagicQ rack or DIN would be exactly the same. So I need something to power them, PoE device, so I'm using our GS8 as our PoE switch, and then of course the programming is all done on the MagicQ end. These are just triggered. Now there is a little bit of setup to do on the device itself. If you've got a brand new one out of the box, I've done some of that here already. Before we get there, let me talk about the console end of things. We'll do a bit of config on the console, jump to the TouchScenes, and then we'll look at the programming side. So let's jump into MagicQ on the PC here. If I go to my setup window and I go to view settings and network, you can see I've got a 10.IP address already. I've already set a static IP address on my network adapter. We've covered this many times in Training Tuesdays. But you can see my network adapter here is 10.00.25. I'm just going to go and reselect that. To enable TouchScenes to talk, I also need to go to the ports tab here. And I need to, on the 10Scene and TouchScene option, I need to make sure that TouchScene is enabled. Now we also support things like the 10Scene wall plates, which I could use as inbuilt, or genetics if I've got the wall plate connected to the node. So I'm using TouchScene here, but this option is for enabling TouchScenes and 10Scene wall plates. And then we can choose what it's triggering. Well, I'm going to cover these options and come back in a little while. For now, I'm just going to set it to playback 1 to 10, which basically means my TouchScene wall plate is going to trigger playbacks 1 to 10. I'm going to be able to turn those on and off. So I've set that end of it up. I've enabled TouchScenes. Now I need to go back onto the TouchScenes and actually do a little bit of config on these. And apologies with getting the new studio set up. We didn't get the second camera set up just quite yet, but we will have for future Training Tuesdays. So anyway, you can see this TouchScene here is actually talking to the system already. If I move a fader, you can see it's already configured. But let me take a step back. If I was getting this brand new out of box, I'm going to be wanting to probably set a static IP address on these. Now you can run these in DHCP mode. What is DHCP mode? Well, if you have a router or something on your network which is giving out IP addresses, you could just plug it in and get its IP address, and maybe on your managed switch or something, you're grabbing the MAC address and you're assigning it statically that way. Let's assume we're not. Let's assume the setup I've got here, which is just a dumb unmanaged switch, and I'm setting static IPs and everything. So that's what I've done on the laptop. I'm now going to do the same on these. So when you get a TouchScene out of box, you might find it comes up with a blank screen. If you do, swipe up from the bottom and you'll see some little icons appear. There's a little triangle icon. You tap that one. The default pin out of box is 0000, enter. Now, of course, you can customize that pin. It would be pretty silly if I just told everyone the pin. You can walk up to any touchscreen in the venue, unlock it. So please do change the default pin on your device. And then you can go across and you can set the IP address. So I tap the IP address box here. It will take me into the menu to set the IP address. I can put it in static mode, and then I can hit IP address and I can set the IP address. So I've set an IP address of 10.0.0.50, set my net mask as 255.0.0.0. Once that's done, I can exit out of here, back into the touchscreen remote, config settings here, and I can go and pick my console. So on the right hand box here, it says console IP. It will show me a list along the top here of any consoles it detects. Well, I've only got one system here, only one MagicQ system, and only one zone. We'll talk about zones in a moment. So I select that, and hey presto, I'm now connected. And you can see I've just toggled on play or items 2 and 3. And if we jump over to MagicQ here, you can see playbacks 2 and 3 have activated because they've been triggered off a touchscreen. If I go and swipe those off, or I just tap on them to turn them off, you can see those playbacks have turned off. So that's in its simplest form how we can set a touchscreen up. Now, touchscreen can do a little bit more than that. Yes, it can control playback 1 to 10. It's just a remote triggering the playbacks. But for an install, we can have it doing a heck of a lot more. So I'm going to now change my touchscreen, and I've got multiple options here. I could have it playback 1 to 10. Now, of course, you can see I've got two touchscreens here, and I've set both of them to do the same thing. So at the moment, they're just mirroring. They're both controlling playback 1 to 10. As I swipe one onto the other, you can see it mirrors. So I could have one at one door, one at another, they're mirroring, doing the same thing. I could set the touchscreens to different zones if I want. But first of all, come back to MagicQ, and I'm going to set it to exec1. And if I set it to exec1, it's now controlling, guess what, execute page 1 and the items within that page. But again, they're doing the same thing, my touchscreens at the moment. So I'm going to go back to setup, and I'm going to pick a different option, which is exec1 multi. Now, the other options, just to talk you through, exec1 groups. It tells you here, controls exec page 1, items 1 to 10, but it uses groups named of zone IDs to determine the heads they control. If I get a chance, I'll come back to that. Exec grids allows me to say each zone is a grid. So grid 1 could be one touchscreen, grid 2 could be another, grid 3 another, 4 another, etc. Up to grid 50, you can have 50 different zones or controls with our touchscreens. Now let me talk about zoning exec1 multi, and grids will make sense as well. So I'm going to go for exec1 multi here, which is probably the most common way that people are using touchscreens. So when I've set it to exec1 multi, what it means is that each row in my execute window becomes a zone. And I've set already my grid size to be 10 by 10 because a touchscreen defaults to 10 items. I don't have to use all 10 of those items. As you can see on row 1 here, I've actually got a gap. I've got 2 items gap, 2 items gap, 4 items. So I've only actually used 8 out of my 10 items. And if I look at my touchscreen over here, you can see both of these have scaled and are only showing me 8 items, even though I had 10 there, because it's hiding the unused items. The unused items are not being shown. Now, if I wanted to, I could set one of these touchscreens. Let's take my 4-inch here. I'm going to swipe up on it, and I go to my settings, 0000, enter, and I'm going to choose a different zone. You can see my console here, and there's a whole list of zones down here, up to the 50 zones we support. I'm going to pick zone 2, and I've now got this touchscreen controlling something different. So I've just toggled on, say, 5 items here, and this one I've put items 1 and 2 on. If I jump into MagicQ here, you can see in the execute window, that's exactly what it's activated. Now, of course, if you're organized, which you should be, and you've labeled things, so I've labeled these items here on the top row, stage on, stage off, house on, house off, red, green, blue, white. Those labels appear on my touchscreen as well. Whether you can see them on camera, I'm not sure, but there you go. You can see the labels, hopefully, or you can see some text has appeared on those touchscreens there. So we can set the zone by simply just swiping up and choosing which zone we want to control. Zones equals rows when we're talking this way. So 10 by 10 grid, 10 zones, and I can have touchscreens controlling different things. Now that gets us into sort of zones in our controls. So you can see where I had a gap, it's scaled up. So there is a window in MagicQ to do actually the config of how we're seeing things on our touchscreen, what it's looking like. Slightly hidden the window. If I jump into my macro window, and normally in macro you'd sit in the view macros view of the window. If you go along to view macro and you go to view zone, then you go along to view touchscreen is where you can configure your touchscreens. And as I mentioned, you have 50 zones available. So you can see there's 50 different configs for touchscreens here. So each of the touchscreens, we can change the layout. So the layout could be buttons with faders, and that's our default. And that's what you're seeing here on the touchscreen. Each of these is a button with a fader, so I can press it to toggle on and off. But if I want, I can also pick the button up and I can pick the fader up there. So I've got the option. It's a button to toggle on or off, or I have a fader as well. On each of the touchscenes, so I'm now modifying the first zone one, which is my biggest touchscene here, and I could set it to buttons only. Now it just becomes toggle on off buttons, whereas this one here remains being faders. You can see I've got different levels on the little 4-inch here. So across zones I can have different controls, or I could have a little 4 buttons, 6 faders. So it's now giving me 4 buttons on the top, 6 faders. Why is it only showing me 3? Well, because I didn't put anything on that item in the execute window. I haven't used all 10 items, I only did 8 there. And then I've got this option here which says unprogrammed items do not show. That's our default. That's why I'm only seeing 8 items. If I turn that to show, and then I went back to say buttons with faders, you can see it shows me all 10 items, but it's showing me the gap. So I did 2 items gap, 2 items gap, 4 items. So it's not scaling anymore, it's showing me the gap. You'll also see there's a logo on this touchscreen here. There's a ChamSys logo here. You can load in PNGs, bitmaps, etc., and you can have these appear on your touchscreen. Now maybe it's a logo for the venue, maybe it's the installer or the helpline for, lights don't work, call this number or something. So all you need to do is you select your bitmap image. If you're on a PC system, let me open File Manager. It goes into Documents, MagicQ Show, not Audio. It goes into the bitmaps folder, and in there you can place in your bitmaps that you can use to appear on your touchscreen. So I could say, okay, well I want, I've got the ChamSys logo here, but maybe here's a Strike V. There's a Strike V fixture for some reason. I may want the Strike V there or something. And that can appear there. And you can see at the moment it's sitting on the left. Now important, the location field, we default to none, which means you won't see anything. And you can choose the location for it. Okay, I want it to sit on the right-hand side. It's now on the right-hand side of my touchscreen. On the 4-inch, I want the ChamSys logo, and I want that to be at the top. And that would appear at the top of my touchscreen at the moment. So you've got the options there, and you can move your logos around. So I've got none, I've got top, bottom, left, and right. So I can toggle around where the logo appears. There are 2 different themes available on the touchscreen. You've got A theme and B theme. So A theme, this one here, doesn't show the sort of the fader caps or the fader knobs. B theme there just changes the styling. And you have a dark or light color scheme. Again, depending on the image you're going to use as your background, you have a dark and light color scheme you can use. Now you can completely customize the background color. You can enter a hex color here if you'd like, and you can set the background color to any color you like. And then you have brightness controls. So the brightness control you can actually control on the touchscreen itself by swiping up and going 0000, enter, and you have a brightness control here, a fader controlling the brightness of your touchscreen. But we can override that from the console. So maybe actually I don't want someone, even if I've given them the pin to get into the settings to change the brightness, I want to set a minimum brightness. I always want the touchscreen to be no dimmer than 50%, but only go up to say 70%. And then I can actually go and specify the brightness right now is 65% or something. So I can specify the brightness that I want, and away I go. Then we have a lock screen. So we can have a lock screen so that when the thing goes into screen save mode, it shows an image on my screen. So I'm doing this on zone 1. Here's one I made earlier. Here's a screen save image, and I can set the time for it to appear. So after not touching the device for say 10 seconds, and I enable the lock screen. So if I go and move a fader on here, and when I leave it for 10 seconds, it will show me, hopefully, in a moment, my lock screen after 10 seconds. Now the lock screen image here, let's see who from our marketing department is paying attention to Training Tuesdays to see where this image is from here. So there you go, there's a lovely Alex and Tyler here, which I've set as my lock screen image. Now right now I've got my lock screen image, and if I tap the touch screen, it comes out of screen save mode, and I can control my playbacks or the items on my touch screen. If I scroll to the right in my window here, I can now set a pin. So you have 2 pin numbers. You have the interface pin, 1, 2, 3, 4. I've just set that as my interface pin, and my admin pin I've set as 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, sorry, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now I've set those 2 pins. Well, what do they mean? Well, the interface pin, if I now come back to my touch screen and I tap on it, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have to enter a pin to get to the controls. So if I'm sitting this, maybe in a public space, in the side of a theatre somewhere, or in a school hall or something, I don't want anyone to be able to control the lights. I want it to be on a pin, so I've set a custom pin. Of course, after 10 seconds, the device is going to lock itself again. So I walk away. After 10 seconds, it's just going to auto lock itself, exactly like so about now. There you go. So it's now locked itself off. If I tap on the device again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and unlock it. So maybe I give venue staff, the front of house staff, or someone access to unlock the device. But if I want to change zone or do something else, I need to know this other pin, which is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, enter. And now I can go into the settings and I can change the IP address, choose what it's controlling, set the brightness, etc., or go back to controls again. So 2 different pins, one just to operate the thing and one to mess around with the settings of a device. Now I mentioned earlier there are some other configs for TouchScene. So if I go to setup, go to view settings and ports, there's this option here of exec grids. Again, grids, each grid becomes a zone. And then this other one of exec1 groups, basically one execute window, you use a group to define what it's controlling. So as it says here, you have a group called zone 1, zone 2, etc. So it's one lot of programming, whatever's in the group, it applies to those respective groups there. Final thing just to mention then is linking of zones and zoning. So if I go back to my macro window, I've got 2 touchscenes here controlling separate things. Let me get rid of Tyler on the screensaver for a moment. Let's disable my lock screen so I'm always just back and open. There we go. So I'm in the touchscene view, but if I come back and I go to view zones here, you have this zone window here which allows me to join things together. So at the moment these are operating completely independently, 2 different zones triggering different things. In the zone window here I can link zones together. So I've now linked zone 1 and 2 together, and when I operate my touchscene, it's operating item 1 on both at the same time. You can see that even though it's separate programming. So if I toggle that on and off, you can see there. And if I go to the execute window here, you can see item 1 is off on both, but if I tap here, it activates on both. So it's activating the separate program, those 2 zones are linked together. And if I come back here and I go to my macro zone window, I can then split the joining so they could run as 2 separate zones. Now that's useful if you've got, say, a hall, which has got maybe a wall that could divide the space. You can open and close that zoning. And yes, you can do things like with automations based on a contact trigger, time of day, anything you like to join and separate zones all together there. So there you go, a little bit of a longer Training Tuesday today. That's talking about TouchScene configured with a MagicQ control system. As mentioned, we will cover TouchScene configured with QuickQ and genetics in future Training Tuesdays. This has been our first Training Tuesday from the Training Tuesday new studio here at ChamSys. We look forward to seeing you on the next one soon.